tried it, so you don't have to.
You were the talk of the town.
And I was the talk of the town because Patrick pinches butts.
Butt pincher.
Hey guys, welcome to my channel. So this is a very special story time for me. It actually is a big part of my life and a major moment in my life that just changed. Do you know those moments in your life where something happens and you know it will change you forever? Well, this is one of those moments, and I'd like to share it with you. The story that I'm going to be talking about is the day that my dad had cardiac arrest. So I'm going to talk about that, and it's a very important story to me, and it's very touching. What I just want to say right now is everything's okay, and he's still alive to this day, and I'm very happy about that. But I wanted to go into that story a bit more. So why don't we dive right on in and get to the story. So let's start from the beginning. March 20th, 2015. That day will be ingrained in my mind for the rest of my life. That's the day that my dad had cardiac arrest. So let's start from the beginning. I was still living at home at the time, and we lived in Kemptville, Ontario. My room was in the basement of our home. My parents slept upstairs. So about 4 in the morning, I hear my mom yell and call my name, and for some reason, it instantly woke me up. I woke up, and I would normally be like, oh, what is it? And take my time. But for some reason that morning when I woke up and heard her call, I immediately went running up the stairs. I ran up, and I heard the worst words ever. Your father's not breathing. Something's wrong. I ran into their bedroom, my mom already on the phone with 911. I ran up to my dad, and he is in fact not breathing. So, luckily from my previous positions in Parks and Recreation, I knew how to perform first aid and CPR. So while she's on the phone with 911, I tell her we have to get him off the bed. He's not breathing. So she grabs his legs, I grab his shoulders and his head, and we get him down on the floor. I immediately grab the phone, since my mom was having difficulty with the 911 agent, and I explained to her, the agent I mean, how my father is not breathing and how I'm about to start CPR. The agent on the line didn't really want me to start yet. She wanted me to check a bunch of different vitals, but me knowing first aid and CPR, I knew that that would just be time wasted. So I got straight to compressions, and I gave those compressions quite hard that it broke his sternum. Actually, no. The doctor said it didn't break his sternum. It broke some ribs. With CPR, you have to be you have to press with a lot of force. So I do my CPR, and then I go to try and give 2 breaths, but I'm not able to because he's so clenched that I can't even pry his jaw open. So what I end up doing is just continuing my compressions. While that's happening, the 911 agent is trying to walk me through CPR, but luckily I already knew what I was doing. The paramedics arrived immediately. Thankfully, we live close to a hospital, and it felt like 5 minutes away. It probably felt like a lot longer, but I was able to get in 2 rounds of compressions. Compressions are 30 in a row, so I was able to do 2 rounds of that, so 60 full compressions. The paramedics arrived, they ran into the bedroom, threw the bed aside, and that's when it finally hit me that it was my father that I was doing compressions on. I stepped away, they got right to him, applied the paddles for a defibrillator, and I just walked out into the living room to console my mother, who was hysterically crying. Now, at first, we hear them say, we can't get a shock in. And now the only 2 ways that you can't get a shock in are if the person's already presumed dead, or if they're alive and have a regular heartbeat. All of a sudden, they're like, we can perform a shock, and they do the shock with the defibrillator. Right after that, another paramedic, volunteer I believe, or firefighter, comes running into the house, and he assists the two paramedics. They get him on a stretcher, or a stretcher board, and carry him out into the ambulance, and they tell us to meet them at the hospital. So we grab, like, not even a handful of things, and make some quick phone calls to friends and family, and we're on our way to the hospital. We make it there. He's in a room, doctors and nurses all around him trying to help bring him back or whatever, we're not too sure. And we're in a room on the side. All of a sudden we hear this loud screech of a sound from my father. And what ended up happening is they were in the middle of intubating him, and that's when he put a tube down someone's throat to try and get oxygen, like air in. And I guess he happened to wake up at that time and was freaking out at all these people around him and trying to intubate him. While that was happening, he did go back out and they intubated him. We were then told that he was being taken to the Heart Institute in Ottawa. They told us to follow, but to drive safely. Luckily, some of our friends at that time had arrived already, so one of them told us that they would drive us to the hospital. That way we weren't on the road. So we made it to the hospital in Ottawa, and we made it up to the unit. He was already in, and we were in the waiting room waiting to hear. We sat around, family started to arrive, some friends were still there, and the doctor came walking in the room, and he asked who was the person that gave compressions when he first went out. And I said it was me. And he shook my hand and he said, I want to congratulate you, because if it wasn't for you and your compressions, your father may not be here at this moment. Now that still sticks with me to this day. And it's, sorry, I'm gonna get emotional. And it just goes to show how in those situations, we don't really know how we're going to react. And I just was very fortunate that I reacted in such a way that was able to help save my father's life and make sure that he didn't suffer any brain damage to that point. Now, my father ended up going into a coma for 5 days. They had him in a coma, so we were able to see him, but he wasn't awake. So what we ended up doing now, some people might find this odd, but every family copes in a different way. It happened on, I believe, a Thursday. We took that Friday off, we had the weekend, and then we decided to go back to work on Monday. Now the reason for this is because he was in a coma, and there was, to us, no point in sitting around the hospital while he's in a coma that we can't do anything about. We thought, we'll go to work, and then when he's awake and we're able to spend time with him, that's when we'll take the time that we need from work. He was in the coma for 5 days, and then he woke up from it, or they woke him out of it, because it was an induced coma. It wasn't that he slipped into a coma. It was an induced coma to repair and secure the body, I guess, to make sure that he was able to recover as needed. Now, he was on some heavy medications, and he was hardly able to speak because of the intubation, of course. He did have a catheter in, and he was making some significant recovery, but then all of a sudden he slipped back into not a vegetative state. That's not true. I'd say more in like a drug-induced state, and it was quite upsetting to see. We were very upset, and we weren't sure what the hospital was doing to him. He stayed in... My mom's going to correct me on this, and I know she will. It's not ICU. It's another type of room where they have a nurse designated to each individual person in this room. So every time you walked in, there was at least there was only one nurse to that one person. Sometimes they covered like off another person if a nurse had to go on break, but you had like a designated nurse to your family member. He ended up getting C. difficile, and then we had to start wearing the apron with the gloves and everything. And that's when you start realizing that some nurses aren't as good as other nurses. I had a nurse yell at me because I wasn't taking the gloves off properly, but I was, because I had received the proper training. But she ended up yelling at me. Anyways, so he was in that room for quite some time. Every day we'd go to work, go to the hospital, go home, go to work, go to the hospital, go home. And that was pretty much our lives for a long time. Now, after some time, he was moved to a room on another floor. He was good now. He was great. He was able to talk. He was able to get up and walk a little bit. So he was moved to a room upstairs, which was fantastic. But he ended up being in the hospital for about 26 days. He actually was released on my birthday, April 14th. And I said it was the best birthday gift ever. He ended up having cardiomyopathy, and he needed to get a pacemaker defibrillator put in his body. Now, looking back at everything, then he was able to come home. And you might think that's the end of the story. What a happy ending. But it's never the end of the story. He wasn't the same at first. And it takes time. And people react and recover from things very differently. So it felt like he was a different person for a long time. But then things got better and he became his old self. And that's the story of how I gave my father CPR and he had cardiac arrest and how he recovered from it. Now, we're a very fortunate family. Not a lot of people have family members that survive from cardiac arrest. So we're a very lucky family for sure. And it just so happened that the timing worked out perfectly. He started making sounds of not breathing. My mom immediately woke up. She immediately called for me. She got on the phone with 911. I knew how to do compressions. So we're a very fortunate family. But now I just want to talk about looking back and the support we received. Now, we did receive a lot of support to an extent from family and some friends, but we were in a religion that is supposed to be very community based and that they take care of each other. But the religious members who were considered our friends didn't even really go out of their way to even visit, make sure we were good, check in on us, or anything. It was actually our friends not in the religion, or that weren't really following it properly, I guess, if you want to say, that were the ones that were there. And we're very grateful to those people. It was a tough time for our family, but it just shows that in a time of crisis, you really see who's there for you and who will be there for you in these times of need. Now, I'm not trying to make this video a doom and gloom video. I just want to share this experience that I went through. It happened, and the reason I'm doing it right now is it happens to be the 5-year anniversary that my father has survived from his cardiac arrest. I'm very happy to say he's still with us today, and I'm very grateful for that. I still jokingly to this day keep saying, whenever he gives me pushback on things that I ask him to do, I always jokingly say, I saved your life. You can't say that. But that's just a joke between us. So that's my story. And I know I probably didn't get all of it right. I'm sure when this video comes up, my mom will say how I missed this, or I missed that, or I should have said this, or I should have said that. So if that's the case, get ready for a part 2. I'll probably have her on at that point. But I hope you guys like this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye.